Hey, deep divers. Welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be looking at something that everybody thinks they know, but maybe we can learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
We're going to be taking a deep dive into telling time.
Okay.
And the way we're going to do that is by looking at this really interesting source that I found. It's the description of a JavaScript HTML5 applet that was designed to help children learn how to tell time.
Interesting.
And it's not just a digital clock. It actually gets into the logic of the clock face.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and one of the things it talks about is this common misconception where kids will look at the clock and they'll see that the hour hand is really close to the 7,
Right?
and it's 6.55, and they'll say, oh, it's 7.55.
Oh, yeah. I remember having that problem.
Yeah, me too, and I think a lot of people probably do.
Yeah.
So this applet actually gets into like the visuals of it and like why that's not the case.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not just about seeing the time. It's about understanding why the clock looks the way it does.
Right, exactly. And so it's available online as a web-based simulation,
Yeah.
but then you can also download it as an app.
Oh, wow.
So it's accessible for lots of people, which is really great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about interactive learning, because this source material really emphasizes that.
Okay.
This isn't just about kids passively watching a clock.
Mm.
They're actually getting to manipulate the hands and experiment and get feedback, and it's really like making time tangible.
Yeah, that makes sense because I think a lot of times the reason why people struggle with learning new concepts is because they can't see how it applies to their everyday life.
Right.
And so if you can make it something that they can actually interact with and see the results of their actions, then it becomes much more real to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it talks about a specific example where a child might drag the hands to like 2.10,
Right.
but then they'll say, oh, it's 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it really highlights the importance of understanding the hour hand and the minute hand and how they work together.
And it sounds like this applet can help them do that by giving them that immediate feedback so they can see like, oh, okay, this is what happens when I move the hands. This is how the time changes.
Right, exactly. And so it's like learning by doing, but it's also learning by, correcting those little mistakes along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably much more engaging than just being told, what to do.
Right. And I bet that helps them remember it better too.
Yeah, definitely. So another thing that this applet does is it uses language hints
Okay.
to kind of reinforce the connection between the visuals and the language that we use to describe time.
Oh, interesting.
So, it might show 7.15, and then the hint will say 7:15.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because I remember those phrases like quarter past and quarter till and half past being really tricky when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too.
But this kind of makes it make sense.
Yeah, it makes that connection between the visual and the words much more clear.
Right, exactly. And I like how the creator of this applet is really open to feedback, and, they're asking for feature requests, and they really seem dedicated to making this the best possible tool.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us to another interesting point, which is this whole idea of open source educational resources.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What does open source mean in the context of education, and why is it such a big deal?
So basically, open source educational resources are like shared blueprints for learning. They're freely available for anyone to use, modify, and even distribute.
So they're not locked away behind these expensive paywalls or proprietary software.
Exactly. It's about making knowledge accessible to everyone regardless of their background or resources.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. So how does this open source approach actually play out in the real world? What are the implications of having educational resources that are so adaptable and readily available?
Well, for one thing, it means that teachers in under-resourced schools can access high-quality materials without breaking the bank.
Oh, that's great.
And it also means that developers can collaborate and build upon each other's work to create even more effective tools.
It's like a global team effort to improve education.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Oh.
Okay, but let's bring it back to this applet and its focus on teaching time. We've talked about its interactive design, its approach to common challenges, and its use of language hints.
Yeah.
What else makes this applet stand out?
Well, one thing I find really interesting is that it specifically addresses common misconceptions. For example, it highlights the fact that when the minute hand is pointing at the 11, it's 55 minutes past the hour, not 5 minutes to the next hour.
Oh yeah, that's a great point, because I know that trips a lot of kids up.
Definitely. And this applet tackles those tricky spots in a way that's both clear and engaging.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just a clock. It's like a friendly guide through the sometimes confusing world of telling time.
Right.
But I'm curious, beyond those specific features, what's the bigger takeaway here? What can we learn from this applet's approach to teaching, even if we're not trying to teach or learn about time right now?
I think the key takeaway is that it's important to understand the why behind things, not just the what. This applet really exemplifies that by focusing on the logic of time, helping learners move beyond rote memorization to a deeper understanding of how it all works.
That's such a powerful point.
Yeah,
It's not enough to just know the answer. We need to understand the reasoning behind it.
exactly.
And that's something we can apply to any area of learning, whether it's math, science, history, or even just figuring out how to fix something around the house.
Absolutely. This applet reminds us that true learning is about making those connections, understanding the principles, and being able to apply that knowledge in different contexts.
So it's not just about telling time, it's about cultivating a mindset of curiosity and a desire to delve deeper into the why behind the things we encounter in the world.
Precisely.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, but before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to this idea of open source resources and their impact on education. We've talked about the potential benefits, but are there any challenges or concerns associated with this approach?
That's a really good question. While open source resources offer incredible opportunities, there are also some important considerations to keep in mind. One potential challenge is quality control. Since anyone can contribute to open source projects, there's always a risk that some materials might be inaccurate or poorly designed.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
The openness that makes these resources so powerful can also lead to potential inconsistencies in quality.
Exactly. It's important for users of open source resources to be discerning and critically evaluate the materials before using them.
Yeah, that makes sense. It highlights the need for careful curation and community-based review processes to help ensure the reliability of these resources.
Absolutely. Another challenge is the need for ongoing maintenance and support. Open source projects often rely on volunteer contributions, which can sometimes be unpredictable. So it's important to have sustainable systems in place to make sure these valuable resources continue to be updated and available over time.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just create these resources. We need to make sure they're well maintained and supported so they can continue to benefit learners for years to come.
Right. Despite these challenges, the potential of open source resources to transform education is undeniable. By fostering a culture of collaboration, sharing, and continuous improvement, we can create a world where everyone has access to high-quality learning opportunities.
I love that vision. Okay, but for now we need to take a little break. When we come back, we'll delve even deeper into this fascinating topic, exploring the broader implications of this applet and its approach to learning.
And we're back delving deeper into the world of telling time and this open source applet.
You know, one thing that really struck me about this applet is how it can go beyond just teaching time.
Right, it's not just about clocks and numbers.
Exactly. It's like a different way to think about learning in general. The interactive approach, the emphasis on the why the open source nature, it all points to a different model of education.
Yeah, I agree. This applet is kind of like a little model of what education could be. It's learner-centered, it encourages kids to experiment and explore, and it's always open to feedback and improvement.
Yeah, the creator even says in the source material that they're open to new features and modifications.
Hmm.
It's like they're inviting everyone to help make this tool the best that it can be.
Yeah, and that's what the open source movement is all about.
Yeah.
Recognizing that we can do so much more when we all work together.
It's like a global brainstorming session for education.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's come back to this applet and its focus on teaching time. We've talked a lot about its design and its features, but has there been any research or feedback on how well it actually works?
That's a good question. There may not be a ton of research on this specific applet yet, but there is a lot of evidence supporting the effectiveness of these kinds of interactive learning tools in general.
Okay.
Studies have shown that when students are actively involved in the learning process, they remember the information better and they develop a deeper understanding of the concepts.
So it's not just about making learning more fun, it's about making it more effective.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
And the open source nature of this applet means that it has the potential to reach even more learners.
Right.
Just imagine teachers all over the world adapting it to fit their own curriculum or cultural context.
That's a powerful image. It really shows how open source educational resources can make learning more accessible for everyone. But we talked about some of the challenges earlier too. How do we make sure that these resources are high quality and sustainable when anybody can contribute to them?
That's an important question. We need to have strong community-based review processes and sustainable funding models
Okay.
to encourage collaboration and innovation while also making sure that the resources being shared are accurate and effective and well-maintained.
So it's not enough to just make the resources open. We have to build a support system around them.
Exactly. It's a group effort.
As we're talking about all this, I'm realizing how much there is to consider. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about the teaching methods behind it, the social and economic implications, even ethical considerations about accessibility and inclusivity.
Absolutely. This deep dive is challenging us to think critically about technology and education,
Mhm.
to go beyond the hype and really look at the complexities and possibilities.
I'm glad you said that. It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement about new technologies, but we need to step back and ask the hard questions about their impact and how to use them responsibly.
And those questions are even more important when we're talking about open source resources because they have the potential to reach so many people and really change how we learn and teach on a global scale.
Yeah, you're right. This applet is a great example of what open source education can do. But it also reminds us that we have a responsibility when we create and share these resources.
Definitely. We need to be aware of the potential impact, both good and bad, and work together to make sure that open source education benefits all learners.
Okay, before we get too philosophical, let's think about our listeners. What do you think has been the most surprising or intriguing part of this deep dive so far?
For me, it's realizing that something as simple as teaching time can lead to such a deep and complex conversation.
Right.
It shows the power of curiosity and how knowledge is all connected.
I completely agree. It's amazing how this one little applet has opened up so many ideas and insights about learning technology and the future of education. But unfortunately, our time for this segment is up. When we come back, we'll focus on how we can use the ideas from this applet in our own lives.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into telling time. It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it?
It really has. From the simple applet to the big picture of open source education and even the future of learning.
Exactly. But before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something you said earlier about how the way this applet teaches time can be used for learning other things too. Right. The things we've talked about, like interactivity, focusing on the why, and working together, those aren't just about clocks and calendars. We can use them for all kinds of subjects and skills.
So how can we take those ideas and use them in our own lives, even if we're not learning about time right now?
Well, think about the interactive part. The applet lets people move the clock hands around and see what happens. We can do that with other things too by finding ways to actively learn.
So instead of just reading about something, we could try building a model or doing an experiment or even just having a good discussion with someone who has a different point of view.
Exactly. It's about getting involved with the material, making it real, and understanding it better.
Okay, and what about understanding the why? How can we be more curious in our everyday lives?
It starts by asking questions. Lots of them. Don't just accept things as they are. Dig deeper, challenge what you think you know, and try to find out the reasons behind things.
So like turning everything into a little mystery.
Yeah, kinda. It doesn't have to be all the time, though. Start small. Pick something you're interested in and see how many why questions you can ask about it. You might be surprised by what you find out.
I like that. It's like being a kid again and being curious about everything. And what about working together? How can we do that in our own learning?
One way is to just talk about what you're learning with other people. Have discussions, argue about different ideas, and ask for feedback. You'll learn so much from hearing other people's perspectives.
It's like making learning a team sport.
Right. And with the internet, it's so easy to find people who share your interests or who can teach you something new.
And there are so many amazing resources online too, open source platforms, websites, communities, and more. It's incredible how much information is out there. And a lot of it is free or really cheap. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. It makes you feel like you can learn anything.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And that's what this deep dive has been all about, encouraging you to be more active, engaged, and empowered learners.
I like that. So as we finish up today, I want to challenge our listeners. Take one thing you've learned from this deep dive, maybe a fact about time, a new way to think about learning, or just a feeling of being more curious, and try using it in something you're working on or learning about.
It could be anything, a personal project, a work goal, or just learning something new for fun. The important thing is to keep learning.
And remember, learning never stops. There's always something new to discover, new connections to make, and those aha moments to have.
So keep those brains working. Explore, experiment, collaborate, and never stop diving deep into knowledge.
And on that note, that's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.